Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting live stream for tomorrow at the Byron Nelson. Gonna break down everything you need to know for DFS and for props to get you ready for tomorrow's slate. Any of your questions, the weather, some strategy, some lineup construction over there for the DFS side. And then for props, a few slips, a few prop leans that I'm taking for both sites to give you an idea of what I'm getting to for tomorrow. But first off, welcome on in. We have Doc D down there early. We got Go Cool It down there, Anthony, Zach, Derek, and Kep down there. First off, welcome to the live stream. And if you have any questions, I'll make sure to get to those here in just a few minutes. But first off, welcome on in, and hopefully you're having a solid Thursday night. But the round didn't finish. It got close to finishing out there, but it's not going to have an impact on play for tomorrow. I think it's 3, maybe 4 groups that didn't finish up their play, and they only have about maybe a hole and a half left. So they're going to go out there, right, finish up their round before their tee time, and they don't even have to move back the tee times in the morning, right? Because those players that still have to finish up are going off towards the end of the tee times. So there's going to be no impact on the play. The thing to note from today was that the PM wave actually played easier than the morning, a lot because of the winds dying down as the day went on, which I don't think a lot of the forecasts were calling for that. So that was maybe a little bit outside the norm, but I stacked both waves, right? I thought we might see a weather edge go to one side or the other. And with this weather forecast for Friday, it does look like the PM wave today, right? So the PM AM guys are going to get an advantage, because if we take a look at the forecast for Friday, and this is going to be useful when we talk about DFS here in just a minute. It looks like the winds in the morning are significantly lower than what we have in the afternoon. It does look like it's going to be mild temperatures for pretty much the entire day. And though there's a little bit of rain coming overnight, you can see a slight chance of rain towards the start of play. It's nothing that's going to make play more difficult, right? If it's just a little sprinkle out there like they're calling for, if anything, it might actually make the golf course easier. And when you have those winds that kick up just as the day goes on, right? It starts at like 2 to 4 miles an hour. It goes up to like 6 to 10 around noon, and then around the afternoon, right, it's a solid 10 to 12 miles an hour sustained. It's a solid 14, maybe 15 miles an hour of wind gusts. If we're going to get that steady increase, you're probably going to see the same kind of difference, but flipped, right? So if it was about a 0.7 shot difference today, maybe it's a half a stroke, maybe it's 0.6, 0.7 shots tomorrow, and it's both waves, right? Both the same wave, I should say, right, out there for Thursday and Friday, that is going to get that advantage. So if you went out there and you stacked a few lineups, in my case, I did 25%, that went all PM AM players, I think you might be able to get some sort of a tangible edge. So that's something to, at least note when it comes to the main slate format. And for DFS, I do think that the morning guys, even for props out there on that end, you probably want to target some of the morning starters. So that's what I'll say from the weather. We'll circle back on this when we talk about props later. But the golf course setup, they did post the pin sheet. I haven't gone hole by hole quite yet, but it looks like a few of the scoreable holes are easier. So like, for example, hole 14, which is borderline drivable, I would say it's an easier pin location for tomorrow. Even hole 18, I would say, is easier. 9 isn't all that difficult as another par 5. But then you have a few holes like 6, right? 6 is going to be a lot more difficult out there for tomorrow. So we'll have to do more of a deep dive later on that. So what I'm going to do now is go over our sponsor for the show before we talk about DFS, which of course is Ship It Nation. And if for all of your DFS needs outside of golf, they offer golf as well, but for a variety of different sports, make sure to check out Ship It Nation. They're a partner with the channel here, a sponsor of all of these live streams. And on top of just offering PGA DFS content, right, they offer pretty much everything else out there. And just over the last few days, they've added an optimizer to their service. So as of right now, if you're a part of Ship It Nation, you also get access to their Shiptimizer that they're calling it, which is, of course, an optimizer of its own out there free for users right now. Now, I think that's going to be a paid add-on at some point, but they're constantly adding to the product. You have all these different sports that you can choose from on there. So while we focus on PGA DFS content here, right, if you're looking for all of those different other sports, right, the first place to look is out there, Ship It Nation. So if you're signing up, use code Luke15 on any sort of membership out there, and you'll go ahead and get that 15% discount. So check it out if you guys haven't already. I know a lot of you down there in chat are already probably familiar out there with Ship It Nation, but if not, They are great for a lot of those other sports and, of course, the sponsor of this live stream. But what I'm going to focus on for now is the DFS side. So I've got my projection sheet up here. We don't have everyone right uncensored, but you're going to get a good idea for my exposure. So with that seemingly maybe half a shot, maybe 0.7 shot morning edge out there with slightly better conditions, I'm only taking morning wave players. Now, is there a good chance that a PM wave player gets there, right? Probably maybe one or two gets out there into the optimal lineup. Sure, but you're not going to need the absolute nuts to win the GPP, right? Even for the large field GPPs for main slate where we have 20, sometimes even like 30, 40,000 entries like out there for major championships, almost every single time you play those, the actual optimal lineup is not taking down the GPPs. It's because there are so many players that you can choose from, right? Even in like a 50, 60 player field like you have for the Masters, a lot of the times the lineup that takes down, right, the big $20 big milli maker out there for that week is far from optimal. And what you're going to get on a week like that, right, when you have everything being far from optimal is what was I trying to get to there? What you're going to get when you have all these lineups that are getting there from far from optimal is out there for round 2 showdown. The way to get the biggest edge, right, is to get a near optimal lineup, right? If you don't have to have the absolute nuts to go out there and win the GPP, right? If you go out there, get a little weather edge, which I only think it's gonna be like a half a stroke out there tomorrow, right? I don't think it's going to be this massive advantage. But if you go out there and you target a player pool of only AM guys, it's going to give you a much better chance of going out there and getting that near optimal lineup, right? Because I don't think you need the nuts. I don't think you have to have that PM guy that goes off. And if it's only like 1-2 guys that go off in that PM wave, right, then maybe you don't have to have that to take down the big GPP. So that's what I was trying to get to. I was going off in too long a tangent. I forgot what I was going for a second. But that's the idea, right? Is that if I'm taking all morning guys, I can live with the fact that maybe 1 or 2 of the PM guys get there because I know that they're going to have slightly more receptive greens, right? That's a given, right? Playing in the morning wave. But on top of that, they have that slight little weather edge there too. So let me catch up on chat. Let me not forget what I was going with again. And let's talk through some of the strategy, some of my player pool and what I'm going through with each different tier range. So first off, down there in chat. So who do I think is going to surge and make the cut? I have to think about that. I'll let you know a little bit later on, though. Sanjay withdrawing and Sam Ryder killed your player pool. You'd be on top of the leaderboards if it wasn't for that. Well, I would say that's probably not true, right? Because even if you didn't play those guys, you'd still have to get the nuts in the other 2 spots. But I feel you on the Sanjay M withdrawal, right? That was definitely a little bit of a bummer. He's sick. Nothing we can really do about that. But yeah, no, you probably wouldn't be in first place if I'm being frank with you. Gary says, what's good? What's going on, bro? What's going on? Ross down there. Been about a year. Yeah, it's been a while, dude. I remember seeing you down live chat. So hopefully you're doing well. What's going on, Metro? Let's have a good Friday. Yeah, today went pretty well. Profited for props. I'd say for DFS outside the Sanjay withdrawal, I'm pretty happy about my exposure. I have a lot of those top end finishers. Matt Wallace, of course, the absolute nuts play. Somebody I took in 15% of my lineups. So I feel pretty good about it, right? This is a volatile event. It's a birdie fest. So you're going to get a lot of volatility with the leaderboard. If you're winning all the GPPs after day 1, I would probably be a little bit hesitant to get too excited because there's going to be so much movement by the time you get to Sunday. So, if you're leading after 2 days, maybe 3 days, right, you can start to get a little excited and vice versa, right? If you're not doing so well right now, I wouldn't worry about it all that much, especially if you had a guy shoot like -1, -2. That's far from optimal. You didn't get that many fantasy points. They still, in theory, have 54 holes to work with. So just keep that in mind. It's that kind of weekend. It's kind of like a no-cut event, right? Now, you're going to have a cut line here, right? Obviously, you're still going to want to go out there and get a 6 of 6. But in terms of scoring, in terms of how much is left, because it's such an easy golf course, you have to kind of look at it like a no-cut event, right? You can't really count your eggs until they've hatched. And I realize I still have some of my ownership stuff over here on the right. So let me go ahead and take that off. It's just some extra useless information counting up ownership on the right. So, okay, I deleted it there, so it won't be a nuisance. But let's talk through this a little bit. So in terms of our strategy, right, I'm taking those AM-wave golfers because if I'm going to get that half a stroke, maybe 0.7 stroke advantage, that's going to matter. And from the ceiling performance perspective, right? If we're talking -6, -7 rounds, maybe even better at this kind of golf course, the morning guys are going to have a much better chance of doing so. And in fact, right, I know today, right, the scoring average in the PM was a lot easier. If you take a look at the guys that went super low, a lot of them were early tee times, right? Like Matt Wallace had a relatively early tee time. Norn, Pendrith, early guys, right? Jake Knapp was a PM guy. Like you have guys like Riley up there, PM, right? I think even Kelly Craft was a PM wave player. Same thing with Smalley. But Norn, Pendrith, right? For you, the guys that got there to -7 were still in the morning wave. And a lot of the reason for that is the receptiveness of the greens and also how pristine the green complexes can be, right? When you're putting, you don't have the scuffs. You don't all have the ball marks all over the green, right? I know that sounds like a small factor, something that doesn't actually impact play. But people that are first round leaders talk about it all the time, right? Getting out there on fresh greens, perfect surfaces, so on and so forth, being a big deal, right? It's why a lot of times after a restart, they have to come back like the next morning. If they roll the greens, do all their normal upkeep, right, overnight, the guys that are finishing the round the next day usually get a pretty big advantage for those 3-4 holes. Now, weather can obviously impact that. You saw at the Masters, right? With one of the restarts there, it was much harder, but that's a tangible impact that you have. So these morning guys, it's not just the wind, it's the receptiveness, it's the green complexes themselves. You're going to see, I would imagine, maybe 67, maybe 70% of your ceiling performances likely coming from the morning wave. Now, there's a lot of variance when you're talking about a small sample, like the optimal players right out there for a given slate. But if you run that over a 50 to 100 slate sample size, you're gonna want to target the nuts conditions, right? The numbers will back that up. If you look at it long term, it's why Showdown has such a big edge, because over a 4-round event, right, weather edges can be hard to navigate, right? That's why I stacked both waves. But for just a single day, where we're just looking ahead for an 18-hole sample size, it's much more predictable and it's much more actionable, right, than what we have for an entire event, right? Because an entire event, you have days 1 and 2. You can do a good job predicting day 1, day 2, usually a little bit sketchy. But the weekend, right, trying to predict that is a fool's errand, right? Because even if you know the weather for Saturday, Sunday, you have no idea what the leaderboard's going to look like. You have no idea if they're going to go off in threesomes off each tee. Like obviously, like there's no way to predict that. So that's why, if anything, you lean into it here with the Showdown slate. So what I'm doing is I'm taking that weather edge and I'm combining it with some game theory. So I'm going to be taking some chalk up top. There are a lot of AM wave players up top that I still think make sense at like 20-25% ownership. But you'll see outside of this 8, 9, and 10K range, almost everyone I have is a pivot. So if you're on my Patreon page, you have the sheet uncensored over there. But what's far more important than just my player pool, right? Tailing who I'm using, which, you can choose to do so if you're a part of the Patreon page. But what I usually recommend to people, right, is to use my player pool as perspective, right? To go through, have your own process, pick out your favorite guys. And if you need to, have filler plays, or you need to choose between 2 players, you can always cross-reference what I'm going with. And again, if you're going to tail them, go out there and do so. But what's far more important, right, are the sort of players that I'm getting to. So chalky guys up top that I'm supporting would be like a Siwoo Kim, Steven Yeager. Both of them hit the ball beautifully today. Both also had a lot of improvement that could be had with the putter, right? So to give you an idea with Siwoo Kim's shots gained metrics, I know just off the top of my head that he lost probably like 2, maybe even 3 strokes on the greens, but I want to give you guys an exact number. So he shot -3, pretty respectable score out there for round 1. But in terms of the shots gained metrics, just had a lot of room for improvement. So to give you an idea, I'm trying to find them on here. Where are you at, buddy? There are so many guys at -3 that it's like hard to find them on here. Oh. Where is Siwoo Kim? He's like not showing up. Do they have him as an American on here or something? Okay, I'll just control F it. I'll make my life a whole lot easier. There, that's Tonkin. Okay, there's Siwoo Kim. Yeah, it wasn't updated to throughout the entire round. So it looks like the data golf stuff might not be updated. Yeah, it's not updated throughout the entire round. So this is as of hole 17 for Siwoo Kim. He lost 0.84 strokes to the putter, so actually didn't lose as many strokes as what I expected. I guess if I wanted to get the actual numbers, I could look at the PGA Tour site. So that's what we'll do. Data Golf seems to be a little bit behind when it comes to their tracking. But yeah, if we go to the PGA site, we'll get a better idea. So let me just do that. Or are they also by? No, they're good. Okay, they're all caught up with what we want to look at here. So where are you at? I swear I'm blind or something today, guys, especially for like Sibu. I can't find him on the sheet. Okay, there he is, there at -3. How many strokes did he lose with the flat stick? Yeah, zero point 0.8 strokes. He gained with all 3 tee to green categories. He was using a brand new putter. It's a little bit shorter. He was also using a left hand low technique. And a player that I'll get to for a bounce back, right, is somebody that's doing it from tee to green, and also a player that is probably going to change it up with the putter, right? Whether it's, just waking up the next day, having a new perspective on the greens, or in the case of Siwoo Kim, maybe even changing up equipment. So if we wake up tomorrow, we're watching him on the broadcast. I think he's one of the featured groups for ESPN Plus. We see him out there with a new sort of putter, whether it's a long broomstick that he's going to again, or it's even like a different putting grip out there with that same putting model. That would be a huge plus. I would be extremely ecstatic to go out there and see that. Now, there's not going to be any way for us to know that before lock, right? Whether he's using that new putter or not. But even if he doesn't, right? Even if he goes out there, right, rinse and repeats what was absolutely dog shit today, I'm fine with it at 10-1, right? He wasn't bleeding that many strokes putting, right? It was only like 0.8 strokes, which frankly, I thought it was like 3 strokes putting. So he was missing a lot of makeable putts, especially in that like 6 to 10 foot range. He had a ton of just burnt edges there from 15 to 20 feet. And just hit a lot of greens, was an absolute machine when it came to the off the tee play. I think he only missed like 3, maybe 4 fairways on the day. And on the back 9, won on an absolute heater when it came to the off the tee. So I like what I saw from him hitting the ball, right? Whether it was around the green, off the tee, or into the greens with that approach play. And if I'm going to take a chalky player, right, they've got to check that box, right? Like if I'm playing somebody that's going to be 5-10%, I'm taking a pivot, right? Somebody that's lower owned, I'll play them if they're in somewhat sketchy form, right? I'll take that bounce back candidate, right? At relatively low ownership. Siwoo Kim, I know the score -3 is not the ceiling, right? It's not great. It's not what we're looking for, right? Out there for Showdown. But at the same time, it was respectable, and the shots gained metrics give us a lot of reason for hope. Somebody like Steven Jaeger, we can say the same thing about. Now, I want to take a look at the shots gained metrics so I can give you an up-to-date look on how he played today. But from the eye test, a lot of the things that we said about somebody like Siwoo, we can apply out there to Steven Jaeger. So in terms of the shots gained metrics, he was exactly neutral with the putter. He was a 0.1 strokes gained to the field, so just above neutral. And then in all 3 tee to green categories and mostly off the tee, he absolutely striped. He gained over 2 strokes off the tee, gained about a half a stroke on approach, which normally I'm looking for guys that are gaining a little bit more, but we know Jaeger is an absolute flusher when it comes to the iron play. So morning tee time, he's getting some steam. He did for main slate too, right? Same thing with Siwoo. That's why they're going to get ownership out there for round 2 Showdown. But I'll play guys at inflated ownership if they're doing it the right way. If they went out there, they did it in a repeatable fashion. Now, if this was a 7K player, if you're talking about some slapdick right down there in the bottom end of the 7Ks, then maybe I'm a little bit more hesitant, right, to go back to him, to have back-to-back solid rounds. But you're talking about a Siwoo Kim, a Steven Jaeger, right? Top 5, top 10 model fits at this kind of golf course. So you're not talking about some slappy that we're expecting to go out there and regress to the mean. So those are the sort of players that I'm looking at up top. If I'm taking ownership in my round 2 Showdown lineups, it's up here in that 8, 9, and 10K range. An 8K player that I'm taking with inflated ownership would be somebody like Adam Schenk. It's not like I'm looking for inflated ownership, right? There are pivots that I'm mixing in. For those, check out the Patreon, but you could probably guess who those players are going to be, right? It's guys that hit the ball particularly well today and that are low owned, right? And there are at least 2-3 of them up there towards the 9 and 10K range. So just because I'm only talking about like a Siwoo, a Jaeger, and then a Schenk doesn't mean I'm only taking chalk up top. So don't misconstrue that or take that as, me telling you to go out there and only play chalk up top. It's more so me giving you an idea of the pieces of chalk that I would still take, right? Despite the higher ownership. There are plenty of pieces of chalk that I'm fading, right? Just to give you an idea, like Alex Noren is super chalky, like Jason Day is real chalky. Benny Ann, same thing. Even like I guess Keith Mitchell, right? You could say is pretty chalky himself, right? Those sort of players, right? Like I'm not playing all those guys, right? There's, let me think, out of those like 4 or 5 players, I think I'm playing one of those 5 that I just mentioned. So there's plenty of chalk, right, that I'm going to be avoiding right out there in my lineups, but I do want to give you an idea of the ones that I would take. In terms of our AK chalk, we've got Adam Schenk. In terms of the shots gained metrics, I'm going to give you an up-to-date look there too, but in terms of the eye test, which again, it can be deceiving at times. It was a little deceiving, right? When it came to what we were seeing there with Siwoo Kim, but where's he at? So what? He finished -4, correct? Let me check my spreadsheet. Yeah, actually, sorry, -5. That's why I couldn't find him. Makes a lot more sense now. So yeah, -5 for Shank, like his good buddy Steven Yeager right there. And the shots gained metrics, pretty much the same, right? There's a reason why they were popping in my projections. There's a reason why they were modeling the best for me out there round 2. About neutral with the putter, so not horrible, right? Like same thing with Sibu. Like he lost within a stroke to neutral. Like that's not great with a putter. That's not horrible though. But in all 3 tee to green categories gained to the field, it was about a stroke per round off the tee. He gained 1.4 strokes on approach, and in terms of the around the green play, was an above average player. So you're talking about somebody that's hitting the ball well, that's sustainable from round to round. You know what I don't want to see is somebody gaining all their strokes with the putter. Like going out there and gaining 5 strokes out there in a single round. Like that's extremely hard to replicate day to day. On top of that, right? I don't want to see somebody that chips in 3 times, right? I don't want their shots gained around the green to be like +4 strokes and then the rest of the game to be like -1.5. Like that's an extremely unsustainable way to go about it, right? Those 3 players, the guys that I'm taking with that ownership are guys that are doing it in the opposite fashion, something that's a lot more consistent and a lot more sustainable. Down here towards the 7K range is where I get a little bit different about it. So, I'm mixing in somebody like a Seamus Power for a little bit of ownership leverage. After the disappointing round 1, I don't think a lot of people are going to get there. We'll have that morning tee time, which I think is going to get slightly advantageous conditions. And more than anything, he's coming in with form, right? He's had a lot of pop performances over the last month or so out there in the PGA Tour. He's a little bit expensive. I'd say $8,100 is probably a little steep for somebody like a Seamus Power, but he was chalked for the main slate for a reason, right? He fit this course. He is the type of player you'd expect to do well to birdie fest, right? He's a good iron player, a really streaky putter when he's playing his best golf, which is what I'm looking for Showdown. So he fits the leverage, right? He's going to get us a little bit different if we're taking him compared to other guys here, like McNeely, KH Lee, right? Much higher owned, even an Aaron Rye, right? Getting more attention than a Seamus Power. So you can differentiate a little bit, right? By taking this sort of player. And more importantly, you're looking for upside, right? When you're taking somebody that's lower owned, maybe not hitting it as well or didn't play as well, like what you have with the Seamus Power, what you're trying to find with those sort of players is upside, right? Birdie or better upside, somebody that can spike a hot putter, spike a hot round out there. And usually a hot putter is a good way to do that, right? With a Seamus Power. Another guy I'd take for a little bit of leverage would be like an Andrew Novak. I've got Novak at just like 5.3% after a very pedestrian -3 round. -3 was still much better than the average today, right? It was almost a stroke better than what you had for the field. Yet when people go out there and they're building their lineups, right, they'd rather play a list who shot -4, right? Who has maybe a little bit more name recognition. Justin Lauer at -5. They'll go down to a Nate Lashley who shot 5 under par. There's no placement points, right? If you weren't familiar with round 2 Showdown, there is no placement points like we have out there for Sunday, and people play it like there are. Like it's not like they think that there's placement, but the psychological thing that's going on is people see -4, -5. They see them having a better round the day before, and they want to tail that, right? They go, okay, this guy's playing better than this other player because of their placement. So obviously that's going to continue out there to the next day. And we've only had 18 holes, right, happen at this golf tournament. And there's going to be a lot of variance and a lot of up and down on the leaderboard. So just we're looking for leverage down low, right? I'm taking some chalk up there towards the top. So I'm going to have to try and get different down here towards the 7K range. Another example would be like a Chandler Phillips. I've got Phillips at 2.7%. He's +1, didn't play all that well, does have the morning tee time. And we know he's been in contention, right? In an event, he was a top 25 in another event, went out there and played pretty well, and is a popper. He's a good approach player, good putter when he's playing his best golf, which kind of like Seamus Power is the way that you get to a 7-8 birdie round, right? You pop on approach, you pop with that putter. You do that on the same day, you go out there, you get a ceiling performance. Down here in the lower 7s, top end of the 6K range, you've got Chad Ramey, Carl Wan, who are both about 1-2% owned, so essentially not being owned. Both AM Wave players, both shot even par, so it's not like they had a horrible day out there for the round 1 action, but they're high upside players. Like Chad Ramey played well at the team event, right? He's a good approach player, good putter when he's playing his best golf. Carl Wan, right, is routinely in the first round leader discussion, right? Like 3-4 times this year, he's nearly been first round leader. These are the sort of players that I like out there for a round 2 Showdown. So they're all AM, right? Like I've said with every play, right? They've all been AM players, and I'm trying to get different down low, right? So you've seen that they all have relatively low ownership. 6Ks are much of the same, right? Sam Ryder at $6,800, right? He's +1, so didn't play all that well out there today. But if he's going to go out there and make the cut, he's probably going to shoot 5-6 under par, right? Probably 6 under par to go out there and make the weekend. So go after it, right? We know he's going to be aggressive. He's got the morning tee time to go out there and post something low. And at $6,800, I like the aggressive mindset, and I also like the upside with that sort of player. Another really good approach player and really good putter, like you've seen with a lot of the other guys I'm taking. Now, that's the last highlighted play I'm going through, but it's not necessarily the plays that I want to point out to you guys, right? Like you can choose to tail them or not, right? If you agree with some of the reasoning, then maybe you tail someone, right? Maybe you fade somebody that, you don't disagree with, you don't want to agree with quite as much. But the idea is to show you the types of players that I'm taking. Chalky guys that you might want to be a little bit, I must say like scared of, but maybe a little bit wary about using. Taiga Semikawa is getting a little bit of steam. A lot of that's because of his leaderboard position. I would say that Alex Smalley is getting a little bit of steam. Matt Wallace is certainly higher owned than a lot of his peers. Taylor Pendrith, right, -7. And the recurring theme with these guys, right, are their leaderboard position, right? Guys that are -6, -7, -8 are getting a significant increase in ownership. That applies to guys like Jake Knapp, right? He was a pivot out there for the main slate. Now, for round 2 showdown, I don't see him as nearly that kind of pivot. So let me get a sip of my water here. Let's catch up on chat, and then let's figure this thing out. So I'm going to do some lineup construction with you guys here in a second and go over any player pool concerns that you have out there for tomorrow. So let's see what we got. CT Payne killing anyone? Not me. Kind of glad I faded because he came in with some crazy ownership. So I don't feel you on that, but I have plenty of guys that aren't playing well. So I feel it elsewhere, that's for sure. What do I think the cut will be? So Data Golf, I'll give you what Data Golf thinks, and then I'll give you my thoughts on top of that. So Data Golf has the current cut line projection at like -5, -6. Now, if I had to guess, -5 is probably pretty good for a projection, but maybe it does get to -6. So yeah, something like that. I agree with them over there. And a lot of it depends on pin locations and how they set up this course. Just working a lot. All right. Yeah, I feel you on that. Especially when I was in college, I was doing a lot of that. I was working 2 jobs in college. That was crazy. So I feel you not being able to do fantasy, right? When you're too busy, you absolutely can't do it. 0% Sungjae has yet to kill you. Yeah, it wouldn't have this year. He hasn't done absolute shit, right? And we can't bet on the KPGA. So you definitely did get burned on him last week. What are my thoughts on Nick Dunlap for Showdown? You're worried he'll have high ownership. I think you're around late, right? If you're trying to tail somebody that went out there, had like that -5, -6 round, make it an elite tier player, right? Don't make it a 6, 7K guy. So I would say you're probably around late. Now, you're going to have 1 or 2 of those 7K guys that do back it up, that do go out there and get near the round 2 lead. Now, Nick Dunlap, I'm really high on. I think if there's somebody to do that with, it might be Nick Dunlap. He's one of the few guys that I would probably do that with. But just know that the ownership's going to be there, right? The ownership's going to be there. Same thing with Jake Knapp, right? I think it might be around late. Doesn't mean that you can't play them, right? There are still chalky guys that I'm playing out there for round 2 showdown, but just commit to them and know that they're going to have higher ownership. You need power to make the cup. I'd be pretty sweet with it too. I have them in some lineups. What's going on, Rev? Michael says Tyler Montgomery 156. Yeah, he's had a horrible golf tournament, huh? It looks like he was playing a different golf course out there in the morning. He shot like +9 or something. Dunlap a fade for you every week. Yeah, worked out other than the Amex in this week so far. So kind of like Sungjae. I couldn't blame you for that. So, Dunlap has a pure golf swing. I agree. I think he's a really high talent level guy, especially with his off the tee game. He's not even big yet, right? He's a pretty slender dude. Hits the ball a country mile, and then he makes a shit ton of putts. So when he can get better iron play or more consistent iron play, he's going to be real dangerous. Yeah, Sam Ryder for the win. That'd be great. Make the cut, though, is more realistic, right? Let's get him in the cut line before we start talking about a win. In DFS, can people bounce back from a bad round? Absolutely, dude. I mean, that's the name of the game, right? That's why we're taking all those pivots, right? Guys that I was putting in my player pool for tomorrow that are playing +1, +2. It's an 18-hole sample size, right? Like, I mean, if you play golf yourself, you probably know this better than most. People have bad days at golf. Like, there are days I go out there and I play like an absolute god, right? That I shoot close to 72 out there, right? And then I have rounds where I'm shooting in the mid-80s out there, right? I'm a single-digit handicap golfer, around a 6.5 index myself, which is respectable, but players like me, obviously more variant because I'm not a pro golfer, right? But I have a 15, 20 shot range of outcomes when it comes to how I play. Now, pro golfer keeps it tighter, right? They don't have as many blow up rounds, but it's the same idea, right? They have bad days, just like anyone. And even when you win a golf tournament, normally you have a day where you're like field average. Like maybe today, right, you shot like -1, -2. You could still win this golf tournament, right? Like it's going to be tough. You're going to have a really low round to get into contention. But I mean, just look at all the champions from this year, right? There's hardly anyone out there that went out there and was flawless for all 4 days. Like even Jake Knapp, he got off to like a huge 54-hole lead. Like he didn't play well Sunday, right? He had that, especially towards the middle of the round, he was really shaky. Like it happens to everyone. Are you screwed on Hughes and Pan? Pan, you might be. Hughes, probably not. Like, I mean, they're going to have to go really low to make the cut, right? You need them to make the cut to matter for GPPs. Now, that's the one thing you have to worry about. If they make the cut, then you're totally fine. Do I like Kevin Chappell? No. Honestly, I didn't even look at him, and he sucks. Somebody's mad at Sam Ryder, it looks like. Jeez Louise. Gary says Vegas. Yeah, I'm taking Vegas. We need to golf sometime. Hey, if you're from Florida, hit me up. Dietrich, I like him for tomorrow. He's low owned, Gary. So what I like with Dietrich is that he had a very meddling day, right? He's -1, didn't play all that well. $8,600, sub 10% ownership. So obviously Adam Shank's getting some ownership here, but if you want to differentiate, right, Thomas Dietrich is the guy to get to. So, and honestly, his -1 round was probably a lot better than the scorecard would indicate. He had quite a few birdie putts that he was missing, that he's the sort of player that would normally make those. He's a shoddy iron player, played a lot better with the irons than he typically does, but the putter was pretty average out there for him. So Thomas Dietrich, maybe a guy to keep an eye on, and I definitely agree with that. But I want to bring up lineup construction. It's really the last thing I want to talk about out there for tomorrow. I think the game plan to have a solid round 2 showdown slate is play the weather, right? I think the morning looks like it's going to get the better side of conditions. Now, to be prudent about it, right, just make sure to wake up tomorrow, check the forecast, make sure that that's holding up. But if we get that weather edge, it's that combined with game theory, right? You're going to have to get different in your lineups. You're going to have to force in some differentiation. Unlike the main slate, I think we're back to more of a normal lineup construction. So if you didn't catch my main slate video, my main slate live stream, almost everyone, right, started in the 9K range this week. Now, we don't have a massive 10K range out here for round 2, but I think more people are going to be willing to take like a Jason Day. I think Siwoo Kim is going to be pretty popular out here for round 2 showdown. And I think in general, people are going to spread out their salary a little bit more than what we had out there for the main slate. So in terms of getting different with the lineup construction, I don't think it's going to be as big an edge as what we had out there for the main slate. But like a normal showdown slate, right, if you take the morning guys, you just mix in a few pivots, you're going to be good to go. So what I'm more so worried about when I'm going out there and hand building lineups for round 2 is figuring out where I'm going to get different, right? I always mention this as my number one piece of advice when it goes to going out there and building lineups is first off, have a game plan, right? So for me, it's AM Wave golfers. And second off, pick where you're going to differentiate, right? Because other than where you're going to differentiate, which is 1-2 players that you're going to be very intentional about taking at low ownership, your other 3-4 players, you have a lot of flexibility, right? If you want to take 3 chalky guys and 1 medium-owned guy, that's probably going to work for that kind of build, even for the large field GPP. If you're in a single entry, maybe even take 3-4 chalky players out there in your lineup, and you can get away with that as well. So I usually like to start with where I'm getting different to make it more flexible with the last 3 or 4 spots. That doesn't mean you have to take chalk, right, and mix it in with these low-end players. You could go 4 pivots if you want to, right, and then 2 chalky guys to round it off. Like there are multiple different sort of lineups that you can go with. So what I would do is, if I'm going to get different is maybe I do want to take a Dietrich to get different, right? Maybe I want to take 1 pivot up top, right? Maybe that's Dietrich for us. And then 1 pivot towards the bottom, right? So if it's going to be a pivot towards the bottom end here, maybe that's where we go to Carl Wan, right? It's $7,000. So we've got 2 guys that we know are going to be low owned, right? Carl Wan's like sub 2%, sub 10% out there with Thomas Dietrich. Our last 4 spots, we can pretty much play whoever the hell we want. So if I want to start with a Siwoo, if I'm going to make my second man in here, like Adam Shank at $8,700, this sort of lineup is totally fine as of now when it comes to the ownership. Now with our last 2 spots, maybe I don't go chalk for the finish, but if we went like a KH Lee, who's an AM Wave guy, and then finished it off with, somewhat of a pivot down here at $7,400, I'd feel pretty good about it, right? So, maybe I'd want to avoid a super chalky player like Taylor Pendrith. Now, he's PM wave, right? So we wouldn't be taking him anyways. But like a Sam Stevens, you took him out there for round 2 showdown, he'd be a great pivot to round off that lineup. So in this build, right, we have a pivot in Stevens, Juan, and Dietrich. We have 3 guys that are carrying some solid ownership, right, in Ali, Shank, and Siwoo Kim. This sort of lineup would be great for the large field GBPs. And let's say that Pendrith was an AM guy, right? We're just imagining this for the sake of this lineup construction. Even if you wanted to take like a Chalky or Taylor Pendrith, if this was a single entry kind of contest, you'd get away with that out there in that kind of build. So I just want to give you an idea for how different you have to get out there in those large field GPPs to first off not duplicate yourself with other people, but also to get that necessary ownership leverage. It's not rocket science. You don't have to take a pivot all 6 spots. In fact, I think the rule of thumb is to have at least 2 pivots in every single lineup. 2 or 3, I would say, would be the magic number out there. And the last 3 spots, maybe the last 4 spots, if you're only taking 2 pivots, can be 2-3 chalky guys, and then maybe 1 or 2 guys that are in that medium ownership range, right? That aren't chalk, that aren't low owned out there in GPPs. That's the kind of lineup composition that I go for. So it's the goal of that, right, is to get the product ownership down as quickly as possible out there for my lineups to give me that differentiation and to make sure I'm not duplicating out there with the rest of the field. Let's catch up on any questions that you've got, and then we're going to talk some props. If it's going to be a little wet, what do I think about Aaron Rye? The 2 gloves has to be worth a shot or 2. I mean, I don't know if the data backs it up, but I mean, you think, right? He's got the 2 gloves. He's, ready for that weather at all times. I mean, it's worth the shot. I think what's more important to me is the fact that he hit the ball pretty well today. I took him for a prop, so I was following a lot of his hole-by-hole action. So just to take a look at the shots gained metrics, let me get an idea of what he actually put up. So yeah, he lost 1.76 strokes putting, which is on brand for him. He's not a very good putter, but he gained 2.7 strokes on approach. So, 2 gloves, that's going to be helpful, I guess. But more importantly, I think he's hitting the ball well on approach. Thank you for your help. Sam Ryder and Powers make the cut. You'll be the happiest person. Well, best of luck to you, man. That'd be pretty sweet. Who is the best ball striker of the day? Let's just take a look, shall we? So let's just take a look at approach first. They don't have a ball striking category on here. So Hadley gained 4.7 strokes approach. That's going to be tough to beat. Jake Knapp was up there, gained about 5 strokes cumulative. Same thing with Hadley, was at about 5 strokes himself. Parker Cootie, Kelly Craft, Doug Gim were all players that pumped there. If we go to the off the tee category, Alejandro Tosti gained pretty well across both categories. Minwoo gained pretty solid across both categories. And then I guess Nick Dunlap right down here, he gained both off the tee and on approach, and gained with the putter. You can see over there, gained about a stroke per round. I've got to say, I know somebody mentioned, playing Nick Dunlap before. Actually, it might have even been you, Derek. This kind of shots gained profile is very consistent, right? It's reliable, right? It's not like he's doing it in any one category. He actually lost strokes around the green, right, and still shot, I think, was -5 or -6 by the end of the day. You can see on here, right, it hasn't updated completely over here on Data Golf, but that is highly impressive. So yeah, Toasty is undervalued. I agree with that. He's also a really good birdie maker. So he has a high ceiling when it comes to his fantasy points. You're from Cali? Okay, nice. Yeah, I'm down here in Florida, so we're pretty far ways away. But if I go out there to a golf event, maybe we can hit each other up. That'd be pretty sweet. So let's talk through a little bit of this prop stuff now. So I guess I do want to build. We went through one lineup together. I guess for cash, to give you guys these cash plays before we hop into props. If I was going to play cash, I would take all AM wave golfers. And the other thing I would do for cash is I would play a very balanced lineup. So I wouldn't take like a 10K Siwoo, even though I do think he's a good play out there for tomorrow, because he's a little expensive, right? He's a little bit too pricey out there for me. So we're going to take a Steven Yeager in this lineup. I honestly think Benny Ann's a pretty solid play there as well. We're going to throw Adam Schenk into that lineup. KH Lee with his course history. Now, maybe take like a Schenk or maybe even a KH Lee out of this lineup and go a little bit more conservative down here in the 7Ks. But this is how I would build, right? Like I think Aaron Rye would be very good for a cash lineup. AM wave tee time, and he's hitting the ball well. The shots gained approach. Novak, I don't know. You guys get the idea, right? It wouldn't take a 10K guy. I would live in the 9 and 8K range for 4 of my plays. And then I would round it off with 2 of my favorite 7K players. So cash isn't something that I play very often, but whenever I do, I lean into any sort of weather edge that they have. And then I usually play pretty balanced lineups when it comes to the salary. Now, the exception to that would be like Sunday Showdown, where oftentimes I just play the leader. And a lot of times that leader will be like 10, maybe even 11K out there for the Showdown format. That's an exception to the rule, right? I alter my strategy for cash a little bit when we have the placement points. For rounds 2 and 3, right? It's weather. And then it's going out there and just trying to take a lot of the best plays, right? And a good way to do that is to not overextend yourself with salary, right? And taking like a 10K guy up top. So that's it for cash, GPPs, right? We went over that build. And outside of any last second questions, let's go over the prop side. And if you were just here for DFS, still appreciate you guys stopping by and whatnot. Stream is not over. We're going to talk about props. But smash the like button if you're heading out of here as a DFS person, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the content throughout the weekend. We'll be doing live streams for rounds 3 and 4. The same thing you saw here, right? DFS props out there for rounds Saturday and Sunday. You're going to see out there on YouTube as well. So not sure on the timing, right? A lot of that depends on when the round ends. I'd imagine that the round 3 stream will probably be around like 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then Sunday's live stream, so Saturday night for that one, probably be a little bit earlier. So because they'll have the cut line, right, it won't take as long. There's a good chance that it'll be at like 7:30, 8 p.m. on Saturday. But subscribe to the channel so you don't miss those notifications. And then on my Twitter, of course, I post when I'm going live too. So if you want to follow there, it's also a good resource to know when that content's going to be up. But outside of that, that's it for DFS. In terms of props, we had ourselves a pretty solid day. Now, if Adam Scott wouldn't have gotten counted wrong for his fairways, we would have had another like 5x slip hit. So it would have been an even better day than what we had already. But so it is. So it goes, I should say, when it comes to some of this stuff. It's not the first time that I've been screwed on fairway stuff. And frankly, there was actually a fairway prop that I got helped on because of a little bit of BS with the category. So it went my way once. It went against me once when it came to it. So I'm not going to be too pressed about it, right? It's by the way, what I'm talking about is the fairway props, the fairway stat in general on the PGA Tour is not being kept correctly. There are a lot of weird stuff that are being counted as fairways. There are a lot of weird things that aren't being counted as fairways. I guess just to give you an example, hitting a green on a par 4 off the tee, so driving a par 4 is not counted as a fairway. But hitting a tee box on another hole off the tee, so like, for example, you're playing 10T, but you hit it on like 11T on the next hole, that is counted as a fairway. So that went my way out there with the guys hitting the green and it not getting counted. And it went against me with Adam Scott ended up hitting an adjacent tee box and getting counted as a fairway there. So we're going to avoid the fairway props is I guess what I'm getting at there. The reason I mentioned that, because that was absolute horseshit. And I had been avoiding them for like 2-3 weeks. I hadn't played any fairway props because of that. And the first slate that I go back and enter like 2-3 of them, they went pretty well. Most of them went under for us, but then we get that Adam Scott bullshit. So let's not let that happen again. So if you're just joining us, if you haven't seen the weather, you haven't seen the conditions, they got easier as the day went on. And with no wind out there tomorrow morning, I think we're going to see about this 2.5 under par scoring average for some of your morning starters. So when we're taking a look at the props over here, I ideally want to be taking some morning wave guys for some unders on strokes. So we're going to have to see where they have the pricing. This board went live after we started the live stream here. So it's going to be my first look at this. But even as the day goes on, I don't think it's going to get that much more difficult, right? It's like 9-10 miles an hour wind. It's not really that nasty out there. But in an ideal world, we want the guys that are teeing off early, right? Because they're dealing with lower sustained winds, also lower wind gusts out there in the morning hours. Again, if you want my full weather breakdown, go back to the beginning of this live stream. That's where I go over that in full detail. But there should be a tangible edge. You're taking some of those morning players, and ideally, we want to find some line values that are going off early that we can take advantage of. So I'm bringing up Prize Picks so that I can do a little bit of comparison to their board. And we'll bring up the Pick 6 too for anyone that's doing that. So yeah, we do have a PGA board. There we go. I was really hoping that they'd have something posted at this point. So birdies are better. They've got the board a little bit higher, I would say, than where they had it for round one, which is surprising. At least to me, I think that's a little bit surprising. And these strokes lines are 0.5 lower than where they had them for round one. So I'm a little bit surprised by that. Like, conditions today weren't all that much easier than what anyone was expecting. And I think if anything, they were actually maybe like a little bit harder than what I was expecting. So to have everyone at like 67.5 strokes, like, you got to remember, guys, like, this is not what I mean. The par of this golf course, I almost said something about it's a par 71. I was going to say it's either a par 71 or a par 72. Let's not guess, right? It's a par 71. You've got to shoot 4 under par to cover that kind of line, right? So it looks like the strokes on Prize Picks are pretty low, but on Underdog, it doesn't look like they're quite as low, right? Like, we have guys like Keith at 68. We have guys like Norn at 68 strokes. Norn is at 67.5 over here on Prize Picks. And who is it on Keith? I don't think they have a Keith strokes lineup. Let's see, do they? I might be blind. That's always definitely a possibility. But yeah, it doesn't look like they have a Keith Mitchell strokes lineup. But yeah, it looks like the spot to get the undervalue might be over here in Underdog, right? Where it looks like they have a lot of guys 0.5 higher. Like, they have Aaron Rye 0.5 higher. Now, there are guys that they have at 67.5 strokes, but it does look like there's a little bit of opportunity to be had. So let's figure out what we can do here. I was kind of hoping that we'd get some 68.5s. So they're bottom tier players. So like a Luke List, Hostler, right? Hubbard, right? The guys that are like mid-tier players in this field, they have it 68 strokes. And before we went live, we're taking a look at this prop board. Like, I was like, if we got 68.5s, like on guys like Keith Mitchell, for example, Adam Schenk, right? If we had him at 68.5 strokes, I was going to be considering taking his under. But at 67.5, like, especially some of like the lower tier guys over here at 67.5 on Prize Picks, it feels like they're too low. It feels like they're being a little bit too optimistic about a lot of these plays. So like, even in Aaron Rye, like, I know he's over here at 67.5 strokes. He's a morning wave tee time. And ideally, I guess I'd want to fade some of the PM players, but that is far too optimistic. In fact, I need to see if DraftKings has a board up or if we have a FanDuel board, because there's no way they're that low. At least I don't think so. Maybe they are. I've been surprised before. But let's see. So DraftKings doesn't have anything up quite yet. Let me see if FanDuel has posted. Usually it takes them a little bit of time, so they might not have odds up to compare to. But that is one of the big data points that I like to use, and it does look like we have them. So let's go ahead and do a few comparisons. Let's see where the sports books are leaning, because my initial reaction here is that the board, though it's an easy golf course, I don't think there's a ton of wind early. The PM guys have to be misprojected, or at least a little bit too low strokes wise. So let's see. They have Alex Norton at 67.5, actually. Okay, so these do look a little bit lower than what we had for the main slate. Like Minwoo, they have at 67.5. Now, he's actually juiced under 67.5. That is interesting. And what was his line here? So he is at 67.5. But they actually have him juiced minus 150 under. That is interesting. So I guess I'm the oddball out here, huh? The sports books all seem to agree that it's going to play easier. The DFS apps, obviously, with their pricing, seemingly think it's going to play easier too. So here's the issue, right? This golf course today played easy as it's going to get in this afternoon, right? It was not windy out there. It's going to play pretty much exactly like it's going to play tomorrow. Scoring average was 2.5 under par, right? That's 68.5 strokes. How are they projecting everyone for that or better? Like, every single player on the board, they have it 68.5 or better. Now, a lot of the guys they're posting here are better than average players, but Davis Riley is not, right? Davis Riley is an average player at best in this kind of field, and he's at 67.5 strokes. Like, I disagree with that. I guess I'll just say that. Like, it doesn't make me feel great that all three of these sites seemingly disagree with my take, but I disagree with them. That's for damn sure. I think that way too optimistic about these guys. People have bad days. I mean, you saw it today, right? Scoring average of 2.5 under par. Not everyone's going to tear up this golf course. Like Ryan Fox, 67.5. Like I know he's juiced over. I think that makes sense. He should be juiced over, but that's a wild projection. So, wow. So not what I was expecting, to say the very least. And Minwoo is actually at 5.5 and 0.9x for the over. Like I disagree with that a lot. Like he's at 5.5 on Prize Picks and obviously even money there, but like oh boy, okay. So I'm gonna feel terrible about doing this, but like that's a prop I would like to take. Again, under 5.5, we're getting the juice there as well. Minwoo played well. He's one of my favorite players. That's why I hate having to fade it. But you're telling me we're getting a guy like Benny Ann too? Like Benny Ann cannot make putts, and we're getting him for a 1.1x multiplier. Tom Kim, like I like him this week, but you're telling me we're getting him at 5.5 and a 1.1x multiplier. I think I found what we're gonna do here. Like, oh my god! Now he's at 5. And he's 1.1x. Same thing with Alex Noren. If they were 5.5, they'd be an absolute nuke. But like, look at this with Adam Schenk. Like Adam Schenk, we can mix in for the same sort of prop. Let's see. Rise at 5. Same thing with Mitchell. Like the guys at 5, I think are a little bit more fair, right? Especially if they're even money there. But if we're getting 1.1x for the under on really anyone at 5.5, like I'm gonna consider taking that. So let's find perhaps one more guy that we can take. For now, I think I want to take these 3 for unders, right? Like Benny and Shank, especially. Like maybe I take Minwoo out because Minwoo is at 5.5 over here on Prize Picks. Let's see. Do they have Benny Ann or Shank up? Let's see. So Shank or Benny Ann aren't posted over here in Prize Picks. So we don't have those to compare to. Let's see. On FanDuel, they have they do birdie props over here. So occasionally we'll have those to compare to. Doesn't look like they've posted them quite yet when it comes to the birdie stuff, but like these seem far too optimistic. Now I actually don't know the birdie average off the top of my head, but based on the scoring average, it couldn't have been better than 4.5 per round. So for somebody like the guys we have at 5.5 to cover, right, to get to 6 birdies, that's going to be gaining an entire birdie and a half to the field, right? So while I think it's possible for guys like a Minwoo, a Benny Ann, and Adam Schenk, they still got to go out there and get it done. So let's figure out who we're going to take. Benny Ann for sure. I know I want to take. It's whether I want to mix in a Minwoo or an Adam Schenk or both of them. So I guess they're all AM wave tee times, right? So none of them are PM wave, which I guess would be the preferred wave to go out there and take fades. The idea is Minwoo, he hit the ball well today, right? So like I want to fade him because he had such a good round, and that it's usually hard to back that up. Let's see, today he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 birdies, and he lost strokes putting, which I don't know. That feels like a tough one to want to go out there and fade. But Adam Schenk had himself a day too, right? It's like we can't ignore that with his -5 rounds. Now he had 6 birdies on the day, so one less than you had with Minwoo. He also, right, didn't do that much with the putter, so pretty similar stat profile when it's all said and done. Oh, that's a tough one for me. I guess let's look at the season-long stats, right? It's always good to look at birdie or better percentage, look at a larger sample size, and get an idea of what we're working with. I know Adam Shanks had a pretty good year when it's come to birdies, so he might actually have a better ranking than somebody like Minwoo, but let's double check on that. All right, I've got it up. Let me share my screen. And maybe we played neither one, right? Because their shots gain profiles, I have to admit, are both pretty impressive. It makes them, I'm typing neither. What the fuck am I doing? All right, it's Minwoo. We're looking up, and then Shank. So Minwoo's 123 on tour when it comes to birdie or better percentage. And then Shank is what? Shank's number 84 in the PGA Tour. So I actually thought Shank was doing a little bit better than that. So I guess I take back him having a good year with birdie percentage. But Minwoo at number 123 is also a little bit surprising. Now, he hasn't played as much as Adam Schenk, but Benny Ann, believe it or not, like of those 3 players, is probably the one that ranks the highest in birdie percentage. In fact, yeah, he's number 7 on the PGA Tour. So let's just play this as a 3-man. So I'm going to take all 3 of these for a little I guess it's a 6.21x payout. It's champions mode for me, so the payouts might work out a little bit differently. And I hate that they're AM wave players, right? I hate that they're going against my weather narrative, but 5.5 birdies is high for anyone, right? I don't care who you are, right? I think that's too high of a projection. And the stroke stuff, right? They're at like 4, what is it? Like 3.5 under par with those 67.5 line strokes. Like, I think that makes a little bit more sense than what you have with these birdies. Like, sure, these guys can have pretty clean rounds. They're top tier players. Like, I could see them shooting -3, -4. Getting to 6 birdies is going to happen for a few guys out there, but that's a true ceiling round, right? Gaining an entire birdie and a half to the field. So I like those fades. And like, to give you an idea, like, I know, let's look at their strokes lines, right? For comparison. So 67.5 on Minwoo. I think they all might be at 67.5, but let me double check. A few of the others might have been 68 strokes. Like, the guys at 68 strokes, I would definitely rather fade at the birdie line. But yeah, I guess, let's see. I guess he is 67.5. Yeah, Adam Schenk was also at 67.5. So I guess it doesn't matter because neither of them are at 68 strokes. But like over here on Prize Picks, like these guys at 68 strokes, I would consider taking for overs. But over here on Underdog, where you can get the multiplier, or this 5.5x projection that you can take an under on, like that's why it's such a good fade in my opinion, right? You're not just taking a prop that I think has like a 55, maybe 60% hit rate, but you're also getting a higher payout for taking it, right? And you can correlate 3 props like we did right there, and still get that exposure. So that's why I did that, right? It's a 3-man correlated chord, paying over 6x right there, and that's what we'll do for Underdog. I do want to enter something for Prize Picks, so let's figure out what we're going to do here. And I guess it would be some stroke fades, but we're not going to get a good payout over here. That's the issue, right? An Underdog, we were able to finagle it to where we could get over a normal payout, right? Despite taking all fades. And that's not going to happen over here. Like, we can fade somebody like Minwoo, but we're not going to get a boosted payout for it. And you could say that for a lot of different plays on here. So in my opinion, this board isn't as playable as what we have on Underdog. And in general, they pay more, right, for fades than what they do over there on Prize Picks. Like, for example, if we took 2 overs on strokes, it would only be 2.5x. Over there on Underdog, it's 2.76x. So if I had access to both websites, I would put far more exposure over there in Underdog for tomorrow than what you're going to get here. And I'm probably not going to only enter fades. I do think these boards in general are just priced a little bit too low for strokes, maybe a little bit too high out there for birdies, but there's still going to be spots that we can exploit, right? Like, there's still going to be a few hanging spots that we can take unders on, and they're going to be harder to find. That's for damn sure. But like, for example, like a Thomas Dietrich at 68, like just off the top of my head, like a KH Lee at 68 strokes is probably somebody I'd consider taking an under on, right? So perhaps we just take him. We'll throw him in at 68 strokes. I don't think they have him up over here on Underdog, which, yeah, I'm almost certain they don't have him up over here on this website. But let me double check. What are they doing? Leaking my email on the live stream. That's great. No one send me extra emails, I guess. That would be nice if you guys wouldn't do that. But great. The UI over here on Underdog is absolute dog shit. It takes forever to upload. You can't search for players without it just taking 10 minutes to load. But yeah, they don't have KH Lee up there. So let's just take them over here on the Prize Pick side and then find a fade to mix in with it, right? So I think if there's anyone that you're going to support for an under, right, it's past champion, someone that played pretty well out there for the first day. And then if we take a fade here, right, I'm just throwing in a random prop at this point, right, it'd give us a full payout. So I do want to find an over and an under so that we're not getting absolutely shafted on what we're getting for a payout. So in terms of a fade, like Matt Wallace, right, he's probably a spot to take an over on. Now, he's in really good form after the first day, so that one might be a little bit sketchier. But like, for example, Mark Hubbard is not playing well, right? He's switched to a brand new putter, did not play well in round 1. Like, he could be an over, right, out there on a PMT time. So let me line shop, make sure that there's not a better option that we can take. But like, just based on what we've seen so far, he's probably the best choice. I guess Ches Reavie could be a potential look. Kevin Kisner disrespecting my guy there at 70 strokes. That's a tough scene for him. Yeah, let's take this Mark Hubbard one right here. So they have me limited to $5 slips, so I can't do anything crazy with my exposure. But yeah, we're gonna take the under on KH Lee, morning tea time. Again, returning champion. So not from last year, right? But 1 to 2 years before that at this golf course. And then somebody that's struggling a little bit in the harder PM wave conditions. So getting a full payout because it's an over and an under. But like I was mentioning, I think the better props are over here on Underdog. And let's actually try and find a second slip over here on Underdog to take. So we had those unders on birdies, but I kind of want to try and find a boosted payout slip, right? So some overs and some unders that we can take to maybe get a 3 or a 4-man slip going. And if it's a 4-man, we'll probably insure it. If it's a 3-man, maybe we'll just go with the no condom out there on the prop, as some people will say, and just raw dog it out there for round 2. But let's see. They've got Dietrich up there at 68 strokes. Like, okay. Jordan at 6 birdies. That's still really high for me, and honest. And what's his fantasy score? They've got him at the 39.5 again. I faded that today, and it worked out rather well, but not sure if I'm going to go back to it 2 days in a row. Tom Kim even like up here at 38 fantasy points. Like that's asking a lot from these players. Like obviously to get to 6 birdies, that's why we faded this guys at 5.5. Like that's clearly asking for a lot. But anything above like a 37 fantasy point projection is essentially asking them to shoot -4 or better, right? So if they're at 68 strokes, but they have like a 37 fantasy point projection, it's like they actually have like a 67.5 stroke line if you're taking their fantasy score. So let's see. So they're like, look at this, right? He's at the 37 mark. If you can find a guy at 68 strokes, like for his normal projection, but if he's up here closer to this 37, 38 mark, maybe you want to fade him over here for the fantasy score, right? Because it's implying that he essentially has the same kind of line as a Siwoo Kim. So it's like a 0.5 discrepancy is what I'm getting at there. So let's see. Yeah, it's 35. So I get that's a little bit more appropriate out there for a guy at 68 strokes. See, so they have these whole 16, 17, 18. What are those? It's like what a 4, 3, 5. So it's a par 12. And they have guys juiced for the over, which I guess we should double check the scoring average there. So the scoring average was like 0.41 under par. So like an 11.56 or something like that in terms of a scoring average. I don't know. Seems like a pretty fair projection, right? Being a little bit juiced towards the over. These add up to the 67.5 front and back 9 projections. That is, they seem pretty accurate. See, 8.5 fairways for Jordan Spieth. Like, it looks like they finally adjusted that. That's for sure. Adam Scott, we took him for an under at 10. He hits that, and now they bump him down to 9.5. That is just brutal. He definitely should have hit today. That it was BS that they counted that fairway when he hit the other tee box of all things. Dietrich 8.5. Yeah, he's not very accurate. Norn. Yeah, I'm not going to enter these fairway props. I was just taking a look at them there for a second. I guess if anything, right, it'd be like an over on Steven Yeager, but they absolutely shafted us. We had some of the fairway stuff today, so I'm very hesitant to go out there and want to take one of those. In terms of greens, let's take a look at the green regulation props. They've got guys at like 13.5, 13. Let's see, 12.5 for a Hostler. If I could find myself a guy like maybe even Jason Day or like a player that's maybe in a little bit better iron form at 12.5, like count me in. Like, for example, a Keith Mitchell, even in the PM wave, like if we can find AM wave golfers that are at 12.5 greens, like I'll probably be a buyer at that kind of number. So Keith Mitchell, I know he's PM wave, but he is like an elite tier iron player. So maybe he is worth taking out there as a PM wave guy. But let's see, 12.5 for Benny Ann. Like I know we took the under on birdies, but like maybe you take an over on greens. I don't think that's the worst spot. Let's see. This is Adam Scott. He's not an elite tier iron player, but he is an above average one. So I guess isn't the worst play. Who else do we have? 12.5 on Aaron Rye. Who's it? Tom Kim's at 13.5. Yeah, it's a little bit high. But yeah, like Aaron Rye, like these 3 players, I don't hate whatsoever when it comes to these props. They've got Minwoo at 13.5. Yeah, that's a damn high projection for Minwoo. And then Siwoo at 13.5 himself. I guess the question we have to ask is whether we're okay taking Keith Mitchell in the PM wave. But in terms of green and regulation percentage, I guess we'll just bring up those stats real quick. I'm pretty sure, I know earlier in the year that Keith Mitchell was like top 5 in the category. Now I'm pretty sure he's fallen off a little bit when it comes to his green and regulation, but I imagine he's still way up there. Yeah, he's number 7 on tour in green and regulation percentage. Where are Adam Scott and Aaron Rye? I believe Aaron Rye is up there too. Didn't mean to click on Yakila Keith, but Aaron Rye is number 13 on tour. And then Adam Scott, yeah, you know what? I think we're going to take Adam Scott out because Adam Scott is a little bit of a doofus at times. And let's check how many they hit today, right? Because, I mean, in theory, they probably should have hit today, especially because both had pretty decent rounds. So he only hit 10 greens today, Keith Mitchell. That's very surprising. Yeah, he was number 135 in the field in green and regulation percentage, despite gaining strokes on approach. I'm going to chalk that up to variance out there with Keith Mitchell. And we're still going to play him, right? He's number 7 on tour in fairway percentage. So not fairway percentage, green regulation percentage, the stat that we're looking at. And then, yeah, Aaron Rye hit 15 today. Yeah, book it. I'll take this. I'll take this as a second slip that we're entering. So the green and regulation average, I think, is still going to be a lot higher than what we saw in the past few years because of that rain, right? And they're supposed to get even more rain overnight. Aaron Rye's got a morning tee time. I think that's helpful considering the lower winds, right? Like we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? Single-digit winds out there in the morning wave. But even Keith Mitchell, that's going off a little bit later, right? He gained strokes on approach today, right? Like I know he didn't cover his green line like we went through over there, but he's the number 7 guy on tour this year in the category. Like Keith, you know, guys like Keith Mitchell were only beat by a Tony Finau, Corey Connors, Alex Noren, who's having one of the best years of his life, right? Scotty Scheffler up there at number 1. He's hitting 71.3% of his greens, right? Like, so just to give you an idea of how good that is, 71.3% of greens. Let me give you an idea of how many that is. Can't do that one in my head, unfortunately. That'd be pretty impressive if I could. And it's 12.8 per round, right? And that's at any golf course. This golf course is a lot easier than most, right? It's softer, right? We've got ball in hand because of the preferred lie situation. That's why I like those kind of overs. So Aaron Rye, right, ranking high in the category as well. Both players are top 5 in the field when it comes to their green and regulation percentage. So I think they make quite a bit of sense out there. So we've got the 2 slips on Underdog that we went with. Again, I think I would keep it a little bit lighter on Prize Picks just because of the pricing. I think it's maybe a little bit more fair over here. I also think that the payouts just aren't quite as good. And then what I wanted to look out too was the DraftKings Pick 6, which I need to, I guess, log into DraftKings before to let me look at it. So just one moment here. I got to give them my code, my 2-factor authentication, because they got hacked like 2 years ago. And ever since then, I've had it on. So let's do that. Let's bring up Pick 6. All right, so here's Pick 6. So they have the props up, which they seem to be pretty quick about it. But like this Hopfinger guy at 4.5 birdies, like, yeah, give me an under all day. The average for the field, I think, is going to be like 4.5 birdies. So if you're telling me you have some random ass slapdick that I've never heard of before, then we can take an under on at 4.5. Like, sure. I think it'll be worse than the field average. I've never heard of the guy before. I literally don't even know who it is. So I hate to be a dick about it, but like if I'm a hardcore DFS player like myself, a DFS pro at golf, and I don't even know who the guy is, then he's probably a good fade. So let's look at strokes. So the strokes lines actually look a little bit higher here than what you have on some of the other sites. So for example, if we wanted to take some unders, like we could do that. Like Keith Mitchell, I think is a great under on strokes. Aaron Rye at 68.5 strokes, like count me in. I think that makes quite a bit of sense there. Because we need a fade, we could potentially take an over on some of the strokes down here, but there's not a lot of really good fades there. So do they have Hopfinger up for strokes? No, it doesn't look like they have Hopfinger up. We have to find an over and an under apparently for this. So we have some unders. We need an over here at some point. So maybe we find an over for birdies to go out there and make this an actual slip.
And I guess it wouldn't be like the hardest thing to do, right? Like we want an AM wave guy that makes more birdies than usual. And Gsluke, right, would fit that situation. Like he's going to make more birdies than your average, right? As a returning champion, as a player that played pretty well out there for round one, AM wave tee time, so gets the better side of conditions. And we need an over, right, to make these other unders work. So if I could enter a pick six lineup, which I can't down here in Florida, this is what I would probably go with, right? It'd be some sort of over on birdies to give us an over. And then the hop finger unders on birdies, I think it's just like a special example. But these unders on strokes for like pretty solid players like a Mitchell and Aaron Rai, Pendrith, Davis Thompson, I would probably say it about two. Even like a Doug Gim, that sort of player up there, I'd consider it. Now, and now that I look at this, we could take an over on Hopfinger. So if we wanted to take him out, right, and you didn't want to chance it with Gsluke and wanted to go with the three fades, you could take this sort of combination too. So I guess I just didn't see him right when I was going through it a little bit earlier, but this is another way that you could go about it over there in pick six. So pick your favorites, right? Just like the player pool with Showdown, right? Pick your favorite spots, right? Like if there's a prop that you don't agree with, right? Don't play it out there for round two, right? I'm not perfect when it comes to my picks. I'm far from it, just like everyone else out there. Do my best. I grind it out a little bit more than others, right? I spend a little bit more time on it. So, I'm not saying not to tail what I say, right? Like I put a lot of time in it. I put a lot of effort into it, but at the same time, right? Make your own cards, right? Go out there, have full confidence with what you're entering, and don't enter something ever just because I, like it myself, or because I get things wrong out there too. Now, if you already were thinking about entering something and then I like it as well, now that's probably a good spot to go out there and take it. So that's what I'll say with the props. That's all I've got. We'll go over any questions that you've got and hop on out of here. And like Back9Bet said, what's going on, Byron? First of all, welcome on into the live chat. Smash that like button for us down there. That'd be super clutch from you guys. And that's all I ask from you for watching this live stream. Just made it to the live. What's going on, Philly? Hopefully you're having a solid evening. Let's see. Best Showdown play, 7,400 and cheaper. So let me refresh this, bring up our projections so I can find you that. Off the top of my head, Chandler Phillips is probably one of them, but if I had to pick one guy, it's either Chandler Phillips, Johnny Vegas, or Sam Stevens. Now, all are AM Wave players, right? That's why I say that. And all are also going to be extremely low out. Like Vegas, sub 5%. I've got Chandler Phillips at 2.7%, like you can see. And then Sam Stevens, I've got it like sub 3% ownership. So they're all leverage plays. I think they all still have upside out there for round two. So that's what I would go with, man. Pick your favorite. Let's see. This guy always tries to get me to say stuff, but I'm too quick for that, man. You're gonna get other people. You won't get me. I'm not some like old geezer that thinks in slow motion like other people. Hot Finger is at 68.5 strokes. Yeah, I saw that. That's a good fade. Thanks for covering pick six, of course. I try to do it when I can. Sometimes I just forget, which there's a lot we cover, so sometimes that's gonna happen. And speaking of, we've got the Live Golf to the side. So if you guys are watching golf this evening, we do have Live Golf that's on TV. And I've got some bets in. So I'm trying to see how they're doing right now. Hopefully, Arnaban Lahiri is not like 10 under par. And then hopefully Taylor Gooch is not like 10 over par. So I guess we'll see how they're doing here in just a few minutes. But I think that's all I've got for you guys. I'm going to try and watch this golf a little bit tonight. Going to get the rest of my prop exposure in. So I've got to do that over the next few hours. But best of luck with whatever you guys are entering out there. Best of luck with all of your exposure for tomorrow. And we're going to run it back from rounds 3 and 4, right? So subscribe. Make sure you stay tuned for that over the weekend. Saturday, Sunday's action, we're going to have you covered from that live stream perspective. But going to go out there, get after this prop action, get after it for tomorrow, build some lineups. So I'm going to head out of here. But appreciate you guys. Like I said before, smash that like button, and I'll catch you guys for that stream tomorrow.